If you take anything away from this video, let it be this, that the Windows subsystem for Linux is kind of one of the most based things Microsoft has done recently, but in the same vein, the people who would find this the most useful are the same people who already have a setup that works better for them by now anyway. Regardless, if you need access to a Linux system regularly but still daily drive Windows for whatever reason, then WSL might be a solution that would work for you. So, let's start from the bottom. If you've never heard of WSL before, imagine Windows, specifically Windows 10 or 11. You've got your easy anti-cheat utilizing Steam library, your Adobe suite, telemetry included of course, Candy Crush advertising in the start menu. Life is blissfully ignorant. But then you need to do something, just a little more Linux hacker man. Maybe you want to develop some scripts, program and compile C code without having to resort to the god-awful C extension within VS Code, or use a tool that straight up refuses to run on Windows, at least natively. You could do the tried and true method of firing up a virtual machine, install Debian or whatever other distro you like, maybe even set up shared folders and network bridges or some other specific VirtualBox feature. Or, provided you are running Windows as your daily driver, you could install WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux. Open a terminal and load up your chosen Linux distro in a window, and that's it. Linux in a box. That's the entire idea behind the Windows subsystem for Linux. It's a compatibility layer. Microsoft's attempts at giving Windows users a foot in the door to access Linux tools without actually making them leave the Windows walled garden with an external bare metal install or a VM. WSL has only just made itself known to me personally, but as a piece of software it's actually been around for a while, with the first version coming out back in 2016, though it didn't use a real Linux kernel back then, it just translated Linux into something Windows could interpret. It worked, but in a roundabout, dodgy sort of way. You wouldn't want to have used it back then and entrust it with anything important. Fast forward to WSL 2, which was announced in 2019, and Microsoft actually went ahead and included a full, non-sketchy Linux kernel in Windows, provided you have installed WSL. You heard that right. Microsoft now ships the Linux kernel with Windows, provided you install WSL. This change made WSL way more powerful and performant. Suddenly, running Linux-specific software within Windows wasn't a complete mess anymore. You can run real Linux binaries, use the same package managers, choose your distro, and get reasonably close to the full Cinema Linux experience, all from the Windows terminal. If you're a developer, especially someone working on back-end or cross-platform code, WSL could be really useful. You can test scripts, run servers, compile all of your stuff inside a Linux environment without having to leave Windows to load up into a different drive or moving over to use another system. Windows updates erasing your Linux boot partition, assuming you were to adopt this way of working, would be a thing of the past if Windows removing your Linux boot partition was indeed a problem for you. It wasn't for me, I promise. You can even install multiple distributions side by side, which means your machine can be running Windows, Debian, Arch, Kali, whatever you want, all at the same time. The Windows subsystem for Linux as it stands is still not a full standalone Linux system. You don't get a GUI by default, although the WSL-G, guess what the G stands for, does indeed add some GUI support. That means you can technically run things like GIMP or even Firefox inside of your Linux distro window, but you're still doing that from within the confines of your Windows system, not to mention just how janky that would be. Whilst WSL 2, the updated iteration of WSL 1 from 2016, performs pretty good, it's still a VM at the end of the day. WSL uses a lightweight virtual machine platform, so it's got some overhead to it. If you're running heavy workloads or anything with demanding hardware level requirements, you're definitely better off running an actual install of Linux through something like VirtualBox, which is just the tried and true method of doing it, or preferably on metal on an abandoned laptop or desktop you have somewhere. Whilst on the topic of performance, something that isn't really fleshed out is GPU pass-through. You can't really access the GPU's power directly within WSL. GPU acceleration is a thing now, but it's not universally available for all system operations or programs within WSL, and there's still no support for full USB access, so it's still quite obvious that it's a bit dodgy and you're still working within Windows. So how does this WSL compare to just putting a distro inside of a VM? Well, having yourself a chunky old VM can take up bigger chunks of storage, can be a little funky and slow to boot depending on what storage device you've got it on. As easy as setting up a VM is, for someone who doesn't know a whole lot about the Linux but wants to give it a go, a VM adds another layer of complexity, however trivial you and me may see it. Within WSL, you open up your terminal or PowerShell and that's it. Hell, once you've downloaded and set it up, which is like 2 commands, the distro isn't executable in your start menu, which you can then make a desktop shortcut. It's that simple. So what about inside of a VM? Desktop environments like XFCE and KDE Plasma work just like they do on Metal in most cases, whereas with WSL they are still riddled with weird glitches. And in a VM, if you end up breaking something quite badly, just reload a previous state. If something goes wrong inside a WSL environment, it's sort of like good luck rolling back unless you made a manual backup. WSL isn't really designed with sandboxing or rollback in mind, though I'm sure that can be done if absolutely necessary. Something like Java VirtualBox is just way better for that kind of thing. Another thing worth mentioning is file access. WSL does let you access your Windows file system, so you can mess with your normal files from within Linux and vice versa. But this integration does have some issues. Performance isn't always the best, especially with a lot of small files, and apparently some tools still don't work with the WSL to Windows transition, so that's something to keep in mind. If you're looking for something like stability or just for things to work, WSL is still very, very janky. But what about its target audience? Who is WSL actually for? Well, outside of those who are trying it for just the sake of trying it, it could be for students learning the very basic of the Linux, maybe sysadmins who are stuck with using Windows machines but need to, I don't know, SSH into servers and run scripts, but they prefer Linux to do that, like any good Chad would. Or maybe those who want to mess around without either switching over fully to Linux or don't want to or can't install a VM for whatever reason. Windows users receive a little dose of freedom, just enough to keep those who need access to a CLI Linux terminal happy, and stop some of them from jumping ship to Linux full time. Downloading the different Linux distributions that you can for WSL can all be done from within the Microsoft Store, so you can see why Microsoft have done it. It's another way for them to keep their tentacles wrapped around you, even if you do want to explore Linux, which seems to be a trend that is slowly gaining in popularity thanks to people like PewDiePie for uploading his video on Linux Mint, or Steam Deck, where people are actually getting their hands on with a Linux-based system. So, in a nutshell, the downsides of the Windows subsystem for Linux. It's not full Linux, surprise there. Performance can be weird with certain pieces of software still lacking full support, so you will notice some sketchy things if you use it more than just a sort of surface level. There's no full hardware access, it's all still very top level. GUI support is dodgy, and cross-file system performance can be dodgy as well. But if you're not bothered about having your data yoinked or having your desktop take a screenshot every 10 seconds with it being sent straight to Bill, it's not terrible. You can get access to core Linux utils and other pieces of software, but if this is something you're seriously considering, I don't see the problem with just using a VirtualBox. It's tried and true, it works, but I'm making this known to you so you know it exists, and you can try it out for yourself if you have a Windows system somewhere. It's interesting, it's definitely something different, but if you ask me, just stick to a VM. Do you have a distro as your daily driver, or do you prefer having a Linux distro within a VM, or perhaps on a separate drive? Let me know in the comments below. Also comment if you're still a Windows 7 Chad. Thank you for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, etc, etc. And I'll see you in my next video.